Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, AirspeedPrime here with my next Avatar and Korra video. This is going to be my Avatar The Last Airbender complete 61 episode ranking list video. This is going to be the second in a series of 3 videos that are going to bring my big Avatar and Korra rewatches to an end. The first video in the series, if you haven't seen it yet, is my Korra, Legend of Korra, complete 52 episode ranking list. That is linked in the description if you haven't seen it yet. I would just about recommend you check out the Korra one before this one, while ultimately I think you just have to see this and the Korra list video before you see the third video, which I'll release next week, which will be a comparison between Avatar and Korra, trying to decide, which is the better series. I would ultimately say that because I released the Korra list video first, you should check it out before this one, just because I explain in a little bit more depth how I go about forming the list, and just it is the order I put them out in. So while I will go through how I formed the list here, it'll be much quicker, and maybe I won't answer all of your questions about how I made it here, but that's the way it's going to work. So yeah, let's get into it. The Avatar list. And yeah, so how did I make the list? The reason I think this is important is because it is difficult. You have a list of 61 episodes you're trying to put an order on. Where do you even start? So I came up with a series of rules for myself to allow myself to form these lists a bit easier. So as I said here, covered in full in the Korra list video, linked in the description. But the short idea is that I came up with 6 ranking tiers for the episodes in order. So obviously there's the top tier is the best episodes, the bottom tier is the worst episodes, and went through the list of Avatar episodes in order and just placed them into one of these tiers. So here are the tiers that I used. I used 6 different tiers. I used the best tier being excellent, the second best tier very good, the third best tier is just good, the fourth tier is average, the fifth tier is below average, and then the bottom tier is bad. I put a rating here on them to give you guys a sense of what I mean when I say excellent, very good, good, average, below average, and bad. But when I formed the list, I was more thinking in terms of just the general words excellent, very good, good. I didn't put a rating on every episode. I just said, okay, excellent is my best tier. What episodes are the best? And I did it that way. So retroactively, I put up the rating system here to give you guys an explanation, but know that I didn't really form it numerically by giving each episode a list, a ranking number, a rating, and then just putting it together in order like that. It just went in the general tiers, as we'll see here. The grade is there to basically just give a short visual representation when you see the list of where the tiers were, because there was no way I was going to be able to fit in words like excellent, below average, considering how cramped the 61 episodes appearing on the list already look. So A, B, C, and D are just meant to be a visual representation, but when you see A, it means excellent. It means an episode that is rated over 90 out of 100. But yeah, they're my tiers. And then very quickly, you put your episodes into tiers, so immediately you have these 6 groups of episodes in order. Then you just have to put order to those individual 6 lists, and then you have your list in the end. So for the smaller tiers after your initial placement, you should be able to just put preference on it. This will be like your top 10, probably your bottom 10. The harder ones will be if you have, say, like 20 episodes in like the very good category. Then what I recommend you do here, as you can see on screen, is to separate that tier of 20 into the different books that they're in, and then put an order within each book, because it's actually quite easy to order your favorite episodes when you're just comparing it in its own book. And then that leaves you with just forming your list from a decision between 3 episodes, because as an example here, the very top of your list, your overall number 1 favorite episode of Avatar has to be one of your favorite episodes. It has to be your favorite episode from book 1, it has to be your favorite episode from book 2, or it has to be your favorite episode from book 3. That's just logical. So this takes that to sort of like the extreme. Say you pick the number 1 book 3 episode that you have rated as your overall number 1 pick. What your overall number 2 pick is, it's either your favorite episode of book 1, your favorite episode of book 2, or your second favorite episode of book 3, because you could have a situation where you rank most of, or all potentially, of say book 3 above all episodes of book 1. So it makes these big, long, giant lists of episodes much easier to handle when you're forming it one by one by just like making decisions between 3 episodes. But that's how I formed the list. Final things to note before I show you my list. This is my personal list based on my own thoughts on the series, as you will see if you watch the individual episode reviews as I went through the rewatches for Korra and obviously Avatar as well. This list is not meant to be my judge of how I feel the fandom overall views these episodes. It's not meant to be that kind of like, I feel most people consider this to be the best episode, so this is number 1. No, my number 1 pick is my favourite episode. That's what this list is about. So just be aware of that. So obviously there will be disagreements between you and me on like where we place stuff, but it's my personal list that we're talking about here that I went into a great deal over the course of the rewatch series to explain. Then, last thing here, if you have seen the Korra list video already, I released it last week, note that this list was purposely made separately from that one. While in the next video I am going to compare the stats from both of these lists to compare Avatar and Korra, this list was not made to try and fit in with the Korra list. My general thoughts on both series. And what I'm trying to get at there is just that I didn't look at the number of episodes that Korra had in the excellent tier and then make a decision that like, okay, because I feel this way about Avatar compared to Korra, I have to have more or less episodes in the excellent tier compared to Korra, so it fits my overall opinion. I purposefully didn't do that to make it the most fair comparison possible when it comes to the analysis. So I thought that was an important thing to clarify before we go into this. And then the final thing will just be, if you have any questions about where I specifically place things on the list, leave them in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer them and have a discussion with you about it. But here is the list. There's all 61 episodes in order. I spent a lot of time putting this together, so it wasn't something I formed in like 10-20 minutes. Over the course of like editing the graphics for the videos together, putting my like first draft of the list together and stuff like that, I probably put a good 3 to 4 hours into making this list. And then obviously I've been thinking about Avatar a lot, so even more if you put in time just doing the rewatch and where I'd rank episodes and stuff like that. So a lot of time's gone into this. This isn't just, this episode deserves to be here. This was formed over a long period of time. So that's the rough idea of how it works. As you can see here, the A, B, C, D, and E are meant to obviously represent the tiers. A is excellent, B is very good, C is good, D is average, and E is below average. Note, F, the bad tier, is not used here because I honestly do not feel any episodes of Avatar are bad. I wouldn't rate any episode of Avatar below 40%. And you'll obviously note that in the Korra video there was only one video in the F tier, so it goes to show the quality of both series. But we're not here to compare the series right now, we're here to talk about Avatar, so let's quickly go over some of my thoughts on the list to help explain some stuff here. So we'll start with the bottom actually in the E tier. You'll notice there's 3 episodes down there at 59, 60, and 61. The weakest episode I feel is Nightmares and Daydreams, and if you've seen some of my previous videos before, you'll probably be aware with how I feel about that, especially if you watch the Nightmares and Daydreams rewatch episode. The main issue I have is that I really don't feel that the Aang having Nightmares and Daydreams plot, his issues before the big invasion battle, it's not a very well done plot, because 90% of it is daydreams and there's only one nightmare, and so the nightmare feels very out of place compared to everything else, because the nightmare is the one serious thing in an episode that's overall comedy, yet the episode is trying to get across that this is this really serious thing for Aang, that he's really having struggle relaxing before the big final battle. And while there's some fun moments, it just, to me, they spent far too much time when they could have made a good arc out of this, especially when you compare it to the immediate next episode, the first part of the invasion, where Sokka has this loss of confidence just before the battle that is so much better done than Aang's loss of confidence here. While I like the Zuko part of Nightmares and Daydreams, the Aang part just really drags it down to the point where I think it is at the bottom of my list. Now, the obvious question after this is, why isn't the Great Divide at the bottom? Everyone hates that episode. if you watch the video I did on The Great Divide, you'll note that I actually had a lot to discuss in that episode, because I think it's just become this episode that is so well known as being the worst episode of Avatar that no one actually watches it enough to actually discuss it enough, when it's actually a really interesting episode, because it introduces this idea of Earth Kingdom tribes with the two tribes we have in the episode, and the whole idea of it being based on them not understanding their own history. So both tribes have a different interpretation of what happened in the past. Aang presents one version, and the fact that they're willing to accept his version even though it's made up tells the whole story. I think the only mistake with this episode was that the episode never revealed to us what the actual truth of what happened was, and because of that made the overall episode feel a little pointless to a degree. I think there's enough interest here that it works with the whole Aang and the difficulty of being neutral, and his, him understanding the position of the Canyon Guide and the Canyon Guide kind of understanding him. The fight with the Canyon Crawlers was interesting. There's some nice stuff in this episode. It doesn't go far enough. And then I would say overall the legacy of this episode being that the fans hate it, so the creators sort of jumped on that as well and never came back to this stuff, didn't use the characters again when there was an obvious chance to use at least the leaders of both tribes in the invasion. They didn't do that, plus making fun of it in the Ember Island players. The creators, I think, are just as responsible for this being a weak episode in reflection as well as kind of the fandom is. So there's that. Final episode in the E category, Winter Solstice Part 1. Anyone asked the question why I specifically rate all the different multi-part episodes separately? It's for reasons like this. If I ranked the Winter Solstice 2-parter somewhere on the list, I'd have to put it probably somewhere in the C category, whereas Part 2 is a really good episode on its own. It's separate enough from the first part that I think it deserves to be ranked higher than the very, very disappointing Part 1. The problem I have with the Spirit World episode is that it's the introduction into the series, the entire series of Avatar of the Spirit World, yet we never see the Spirit World in this episode. And it makes it such a confusing episode, because it's like, okay, it's Aang's spirit out of his body, but they're still in the physical world. He never actually goes into the spirit world. And the series struggles with that fact, that they are not showing the spirit world. And especially when they later introduce the fact that it is actually a separate world, different from the physical world. It's why Korra had to be very specific about how things worked. And I'll always appreciate Korra for doing that to make confusing episodes like this make a little bit more sense. But overall, it's not the most amazing episode. In the D category, the average category, again, this is the third last category because we're not using F here. I don't think it's too much of a surprise here. I think Botto of the Water Tribe, the Waterbending Scroll, and Imprisoned all probably place fairly low, I think, most people's list. The Chase, I think, is kind of like it's an episode where the good scenes are like the fight with Azula and the big standoff at the end. I think the first half of the episode with like Katara and Toph arguing, getting tired, you're not pulling your weight, a little too drama focused. It's not the good type of character development you want, and it gets a bit kind of repetitive where it's just they try and go to sleep, Azula's crew chases after them, it gets worse and worse and worse until the good stuff at the end. And I think they waste enough of the episode on that it can't be saved by the really good final scene. Waterbending Scroll is just kind of average episode. That's why it's there. To me, that's the definition of just an average episode, the Waterbending Scroll. The Drill, if you watch my review for that, the focus of why that's here is because they don't make a big enough deal out of the Drill and the fact that this should be a huge battle. This is the Fire Nation trying to break through Ba Sing Se again. Ba Sing Se being the one major holdout left now that they've taken over Omashu. This is the last big city left that's still on the good guy side of things. And here they're making their big attempt with their Drill to break through, and the response from the Earth Kingdom is the Terra squad, and they just do nothing. And the fact that Team Avatar even have to be involved in this seems absurd to me, that there's not like a whole battalion, like a whole army of Earth Kingdom warriors going out there to fight the Drill. To me, is just a very, very weak thing. This should be a huge battle. When it's so telling that the battle at the Northern Air Temple, which is a fairly forgettable episode in Book 1, is a bigger battle than in this episode. And again, the Drill is the single episode name of the episode, but in some Nickelodeon sections, it's part of a two-parter with this the Serpent's Pass called like The Secret of the Fire Nation, which is the drill. But the drill doesn't feel big enough, and while they use it in a nice way ultimately in the Earth King to get him on their side, it doesn't quite come together well enough, I think. But anyway, that's most of that. Jet is mainly here because I feel Katara is a little out of character here. Aang as well. Just the fact that like he comes in and is immediately so cool that no one listens to Sokka. It's a little unbelievable. I get Katara because they were going for the kind of romance thing, but I wish maybe Aang had like switched over a little bit earlier on. Similarly, given that the romance is such a focus, I would have much preferred it if we had actually addressed that like Aang shouldn't like Jet because he's getting too close to Katara. Aang should be a little bit jealous. I get that the fortune teller happens a little later on, but it's close enough where it feels like Aang's crush should be pretty developed at this point, and he shouldn't be okay with like Katara like pretty directly flirting with Jet. So I think there's a few out of character moments in Jet that keep it low down, even though I think it's a very well animated episode and so on. Let's skip ahead to the start of the list a bit to explain some things. You'll notice I have two individual episodes ahead of like the finale, the Avatar Aang, which probably is most people's go-to as like the number one pick. Maybe they think about it some more and something gets ahead of it, but Avatar Aang is always that episode that I think most people tend to like lean towards. Where like, yeah, the finale was really, really good, the last part especially. But for me, the Southern Raiders and also the Desert are so high up because they're just, to me, the pinnacle of the show. Because for me, I always say it, Avatar and Korra are at their best when they are doing really, really strong character development. The character stuff is the key to this show being a success. And in both of these episodes, they are episodes that relate to the plot, of course, but are character focused first. The Southern Raiders finally deciding that like, hey, we've mentioned that Katara's mother is important to her. Kaya is important to Katara for most of the series. Here's what happened. Here's the impact of why this happened. And here's us finally really getting to the core of this issue. How angry Katara is about what happened. And the fact that she's almost willing to kill the person who killed her mother. Really incredible episode with the advice that Aang gives to her. The fact that Zuko's almost this kind of bad influence on her, but trying to help her, get past this, and how they turn it around at the end, and it's like, okay, Katara didn't need to kill him, but what are you going to do, Aang? You have to fight Ozai. Are you going to kill him or not? Incredible cliffhanger, amazing Katara episode, great backstory, action and emotion. It this is an episode that really does have it all. Similarly, The Desert is another strong Katara episode, just bringing the group together in this really bad situation, getting to see some anger and emotion from Aang, and again that Aang in the Avatar state, Katara pulling him out. Amazing scene, probably for me one of, if not the most emotional scenes in Avatar. Then we have Thousand's Comet Part 4, Avatar Aang at number 3. And then you'll notice the finale, a lot of the finale stuff is here. We have Siege of the North Part 2 at 5, Thousand's Comet Part 3 at 6, Thousand's Comet Part 2 at 9, Siege of the North 2 at 5, Siege of the North Part 1 at 17, Crossroads of Destiny at 14, and then a lot of, you notice here that I have part 2s of a couple of episodes here. Boiling Rock at number 7, Day of Black Sun, The Eclipse at 12, and then rounding out the excellent here, The Waterbending Master and The Southern Air Temple. I think some people maybe don't rate The Southern Air Temple as strongly as that, but I think it's this essential part of the opening of the show. I'd always say to people, don't watch the first 2 episodes of Avatar, watch the first 3, because the third episode is where the real depth begins to come in. Aang's emotion at the loss of his people is really hit on hard here, and then with Zuko especially, this is the episode where you begin to see him in the way, and I suppose the reason why he is such a complex character. The fact that all of a sudden you're introduced to the fact that Zuko's on his own. He's a banished prince. The Fire Nation isn't really supporting him. He's just on his own and, in a way, isn't expected to succeed. And Zhao is actually the one who's getting the support from the Fire Nation. It's a great sort of twist, and makes you actually care about Zuko as a character that you're going to follow. So, Otherwise, I think the list, I don't think there's anything particularly controversial here. The Avatar and the Fire Lord being so high up, it's an important backstory, and I think they did it so well. Leaving the origin of the war so late, I thought, plus the setup of just the connection of this generation's Avatar and Fire Lord to be versus the Avatar and the Fire Lord of the past, that was really good. The Storm at 8, very important backstory early on. The Blind Bandit perhaps not being in the top 10 might be a bit of a concern for some people. It's still in the top tier, just out of the top 10. I think part of it is that I think in a way it is Toph's strongest episode, but what does it say that her introduction episode is her strongest episode? That she doesn't get the character arc that the other characters do, and I think because of that, it's a little let down, but it's still really, really high up. Similarly with Zuko alone, while I think it's such an important episode to his character, I think a lot of the stuff with Ursa that's presented here and the fact that that plot doesn't really get resolved within the series is left for the comics. It's a very similar thing for me with Blind Bandit and Zuko alone, where the search and the rift together kind of help to add more to these episodes, but we're just talking about the series here, so that's kind of what keeps them perhaps out of the top 10, but they're still in the top tier. And then I don't think there's anything else particularly controversial there. The two middle tiers are where I have a lot of episodes. The Library as my top very good episode, very important plot episode. Western Air Temple, Zuko joining the group, Firebending Master, Zuko and Aang interaction, City of Walls and Secrets, Serpent's Pass, The Awakening, the Headband. The Painted Lady, I suppose, needs a little bit of discussion in that, like, some people may be going, wait, I saw your previous, like, top 10 videos. You had the Painted Lady at 10. What happened? I suppose that's where, when I did those top 10 videos, I'll always say that I always ever, when I did those videos, limited it to top 10. I didn't try and, like, base it off what my overall 61 was. So I tended to do my top 9 and then include 10 as sort of a episode of note type thing, when, like, I don't think The Painted Lady really is my top 10 most favorite episode, but it's a personal favorite of mine, even though I acknowledge it's not the best episode. So I rated it as high as I could without feeling like I'm giving it, like, too much credit. The Beach, Winter Solstice Part 2, Puppet Master, Blue Spirit, Ember Island Players being this low down. I know some people rate it really highly, some people may rate it lower. I think it being somewhere in the middle in an overall amazing series like this works out really well, in that it's a hilarious episode, but there's also serious moments to it. It's a recap episode done to, I think, the best it possibly can be done. Avatar Returns episode 2 I think deserves to be there because it is the impactful part of the first 2 episodes. And then I also have Sozan's Comet Part 1 here right at the end, because I think it is a tier lower than the other parts of the finale, in that it is so much set up for the rest of the finale that I think it's not an amazingly strong episode on its own, but it's still good. The C category is where there's a lot of just like, this is probably where there's the most conflict between, like, is this episode better than this episode? A lot of these episodes are very, very close together. Obviously, I really love Suki as a character, so The Warriors of Kyoshi places quite highly. The Runaway is probably where we get some of the best emotion out of Toph as a character, as well as more Katara stuff. Bitter Work is well done, especially the Iroh and Zuko side of things with the elements explanation, really well done. Sokka's Masters here, The Earth King, King of Amashu. Boy in the Iceberg being that far down as the first episode, it's something you acknowledge that the first episode is memorable, but it's not one of the best episodes of the show. I think that's very fair to say. Fortune Teller's down here, The Deserter. I think The Deserter would be higher up if Zhang Zhang was maybe in the series a bit more. As it is, it's kind of a one-off episode. He comes back later on, but not much is particularly referenced in relation to this episode. I appreciate that Aang's kind of fear of firebending comes in here, Katara learning healing, but kind of very similar to, like, the likes of a Bato or the waterbending scroll. It's just one of those episodes where, like, I can't bring myself to rate it any higher. Appa's Lost Days, Northern Air Temple, and The Tales of Ba Sing Se. I suppose people may be slightly, like, taken aback by Appa's Lost Days and The Tales of Ba Sing Se being placed so low down. From my perspective, the thing with The Tales of Ba Sing Se is that you have to look at it as, like, it is an episode made up of multiple different stories. It is not just the Iroh one. The Iroh one is amazing. It is really, really well done. it is that you can't take away from that. But you have to also account for the fact that like the tale of Aang is in here as well. The tale of Sokka is in here. The tale of Toph and Katara that aren't the most impactful. They're fun in their own way, but they're not like so memorable. Like you wouldn't individually place those specific stories in that high of a tier. And while you would place the Iroh one and perhaps the Zuko one in fairly high up, a lot of the other ones you wouldn't. And that's why to me it's a good episode. It's in the third highest tier. It's in the positive end of the series, but it's not quite good enough to be higher up. So that's why I placed it there. And then Appa's Lost Days, similarly a more experimental episode. I appreciate them giving Appa the time he deserves. And it's good. It is a very good episode. I don't think it's quite that memorable. But yeah, they're my thoughts on the list of what I think perhaps might stand out to people. But again, in the comments, let me know if you have any comments about or you want me to explain better why I placed a specific episode in a specific spot. So let's move on to some analysis of this now. So we'll do some numbers here, analysis, and this will help us compare Avatar to Korra in the next video. So the first one here is Avatar episode quality. So this is just adding up all the numbers of episodes that are in each tier. So if you notice from the list there, 19 of the 61 episodes in the excellent tier, in the top tier. That means 31% of the series is top quality episodes. Similarly, 19 episodes in the very good tier as well, so another 31%. That means 61% of the series is in the two highest grades of episode. And then in the last, I suppose, primarily positive tier, in the good tier, 14 more episodes. So 23% there, which means that ABC, the first half of the tiers, 85% of the series is in that. That's really, really good. That the three strong categories has most of the episodes. It has so many of them there. You can see there, 52 of the 61 episodes. Then in the lower tiers, in the average tier, we've got 6 episodes, which is 10% of the series. In the below average tier, we have 3 episodes, which is 5% of the series, which means that there's only 15% of Avatar's overall episodes, 9 episodes in the weak side of the series. That's really, really incredible for an overall, pretty long-ish series of having 61 episodes. So that's interesting to note. Next, this is the breakdown of those numbers by book. So you'll notice here it's most spread out with book 1, where 5 episodes in excellent, 3 in very good, 6 good, 4 average, and 2 below average. And I think that's the really telling thing with book 1. Just look at D and F columns and go down. 4 and 2 compared to book 2 having 2 and 0, and then book 3 having 0 and 1. There's your big difference between book quality, between the water and earth and fire. Obviously none of them in the bad category, but then we go to excellent. Look down the column of A. 5 in book 1. So book 1, when it's good, is really good. It's just that the quality doesn't remain as high because you have, look there, 6 episodes and 4 episodes in book 1 in the C and D category, the 2 middle categories. So a lot of it's fine, a lot of it's good, but it's only like less than half of the series that really breaks out to be really, really, really good. But that obviously changes in the other tiers, where like with book 2, 6 excellent episodes, 6 very good episodes, so 12 out of the 20 episodes in the top 2 tiers, and then 6 episodes that are more kind of middle of the road, and only 2 episodes that you'd really consider that like aren't quite as good, and they're the 2 more experimental episodes. Appa's Lost Days, focusing on an animal, and then The Tale of Ba Sing Se, which is more of like smaller short stories. And even then, some people may rate some of those higher. So it shows you how solid book 2 is, that you have 666 right at the start. And then book 3 is a whole different situation, where like 8 episodes that are excellent, 10 that are very good, 18 out of the 21 episodes in book 3 in the first 2 tiers. Then there are 2 good episodes, but it's sort of brought down a bit by having 1 episode in the below average tier, and that episode being, in my opinion, the weakest of the entire series in Nightmares and Daydreams. So you can see that sort of brings it down a bit, having it so low down. Next up, let's try and actually come up with some stats on this. So if we assign points values based on where each episode places in the tier list, if we give 6 points for an A grade, 5 points for a B grade, 4 for C, 3 for D, 2 for E, and 1 for F. Book 3 gets 108 points, Book 2 gets 96 points, Book 1 gets 85 points, and that means that obviously, in my opinion, the series gets better as it goes on. It starts off in the weakest book, then it goes into the middle book, and then Book 3 ends on a high note with the highest one. But that doesn't account for everything, because we have to account for the fact that Book 3 has one more episode than Book 1 and 2. So basically, we just need to turn it into an average, which accounts for varying numbers of episodes. So we'll divide the point scores by the number of episodes, and this will give us the average point score per episode per book. So that means that what we get here is that Book 1 Water's average is a 4.3, which is a low C average, comparing it back to the tiers. Book 2 Earth gets a 4.8 average, which is a high C average, and then Book 3 Fire gets a 5.1, which is a low B average. So that's very interesting. That shows very clearly that there is a pretty big gap between Book 1 compared to the other two, and then Book 2 and 3 are much closer, with Book 3 Fire just about edging things out in terms of the overall series quality. So that's, I think, very interesting to kind of think about. Again, we'll do some comparison between what Avatar scored from the list compared to what Korra scored from the list at the start of the next video, but that's what I pretty much have to say about that here. So I'll just pretty much end this video here by showing you guys the list once again. I'll have the list up on screen so you can take another look at this, and I'll just end it by basically explaining roughly what the next video, the video from next week, the comparison Avatar versus Korra, is going to be. It's going to sort of be a two-part video. The first part will focus sort of on the numbers, the analytical side of things. It'll be basically comparing the numbers that we just discussed here to Korra's numbers and seeing what they say about, from my list, taking a more analytical view, what do the numbers say about which show is better, which average, episode book value is better. Then most of the video will get away from the numbers and just discuss my opinion. I'll get into, in my opinion, which show is better and because of what. Where does one fall down where the other succeeds? And even if one is better than the other, is the one that came out bottom still high quality, or is it weak enough that there's a huge gulf in class between both series? That's the sort of stuff we'll get into. It'll be a pretty detailed video, and I think it'll be interesting to kind of wrap up the series with just such a general kind of overview of everything. But I think that's everything I want to say in this video. So yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.